I'm Joe Glenton, and welcome back to Warrior Nation, the only podcast offering a critical lens on militarism in the UK. In this, our fifth series, we'll be speaking to anti-militarists around the world to explore their unique motivations, tactics, and approaches. Their expertise includes everything from opposing the arms trade and militarised borders to countering military recruiting and supporting war resistors. With UK government support for continuing wars in Ukraine and elsewhere, and now the bombing of Gaza, platforming and enabling anti-militarist discourse is vital. It follows that these conversations are more important than ever. If you enjoy what we produce and would like to support us to make more of it, then you can help us keep making Warrior Nation for as little as £2 a month via our Patreon, or you can support us through our donation page. And if you'd like to keep up to date with our work, you can sign up for our free monthly newsletter. World Beyond War is a global non-violent movement to end war and establish a just and sustainable peace. World Beyond War staffer Jungmin Choi joins us now. First of all, thank you. Thank you for coming on. I've followed the work of your organisation for a long time now, so it's a pleasure to finally meet someone who's working over there and doing the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm, so excited to be here today.
It's great to have you.
Finally.
It's great to have you, for sure. I just wanted to start. Could you just tell us a little bit about the history of your organisation?
Yes, World Without War is a peace organization based in South Korea that originated from the consensus subjection movement. We officially began our activities with the founding celebration on May 15, 2003. The consensus subjection movement in South Korea itself had started around the end of 2000, so it's a little bit earlier. And many of us, including myself, had been involved in consensus subjection movement before World Without War was established. World Without War was formed by individuals who were already engaged in this movement with a clear intention to solidify its identity as a peace movement and anti-militarist movement. The catalyst intention for our formation was the invasion of Iraq by the United States in 2003. Prior to that, most consensus objectors, particularly Jehovah's Witnesses, were primarily focused on issues related to their human rights, such as human rights within prisons, social rights upon release, and alternative service system, etc. However, given the Jehovah's Witnesses' principle of non-involvement in social or political activism, there were limitations to advancing the consensus subjection movement solely through their advocacy. So the political consensus objectors and peace activists came together to establish the organization known as World Without War. And subsequently, World Without War embarked on its mission as an anti-war peace movement focusing on consensus subjection. And around 2007, the atmosphere for us was quite optimistic as the first generation consensus objectors from World Without War were being released from prison, and the promise of alternative service by the government of President Roh Moo-hyun, the organization began to consider expanding its activities. So this led to seminars and agenda development sessions to explore whether we could adopt a campaign on arms trade monitoring as World Without War's second campaign. The inspiration for this came after attending an international conference of WRI held in, I believe, in Paderborn, Germany in 2006. However, the promise made by the Roh Moo-hyun administration was nullified when a conservative government took office the following year, and eventually in 2018, the Constitutional Court ruled that the current conscription law was unconstitutional, leading to the passage of the alternative service system in the National Assembly. Anyway, initially we started this arms trade monitoring campaign with a sub-campaign against cluster munitions. At that time, 2 of the world's top 8 cluster bomb producers were South Korean companies. So yeah, that's the reason. Later, we discovered activities resisting arms fairs, like in the SE5 in the UK, and decided to benchmark them. While arms trading usually takes place behind closed doors, arms fairs openly display and trade weapons. Furthermore, in South Korea, after buying and selling arms among themselves, and they even open to the public for 2 days over the weekend. Sometimes invite students by sending official letters to the schools. So it became an excellent venue for our campaign. And then I think it's one autumn day in 2015, I received a letter from N from the CAAT. It addressed the issue of South Korean tear gas being used to suppress the democracy movement in Bahrain. So we quickly held meetings and emphasized with the severity of the situation, particularly partially suspended our ongoing activities and urgently engaged in new actions. I remember it was a busy time as we worked tirelessly to prevent further export of South Korean tear gas to Bahrain, and fortunately, our efforts paid off with success. Currently, this campaign has been established as World Without War's second campaign. And last year we celebrated our 20th anniversary with various events. And we had a fundraiser as several trials were ongoing with actions. And I think it was a time to reflect on the past 20 years and envision the next 20.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about it.
Yeah, no, it's very, very important work. Very important work.
Thank you.
Could we just talk about, because we want to talk about strategy and tactics, but also people's personal narratives, I guess, personal narratives. Can you tell me, how did you get into anti-militarism? Were you kind of born into a family that did it? Did you come to it later? Where does your interest in this come from?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I'm happy to share how I got involved with World Without War. I'm actually one of the founding members of World Without War. Before the establishment of World Without War, I was already involved in a conscientious objection movement. But my initial interest wasn't exactly in conscientious objection, rather in the issue of 기지촌. 기지촌 means the military camp town, which are really unique communities located near, especially U.S. military bases in South Korea.
Yes.
These villages differ significantly from other South Korean villages due to the presence of U.S. military bases, and they often have a high proportion of young women due to the rampant sex industry around the base. So South Korea's 기지촌 are unique places where feminism and nationalism intersect, and they related to the conscientious objection movements in addressing issues of militarism. So anyways, at that time, the organization I was working with, called Solidarity for Peace and Human Rights, was involved in both conscientious objection and Kijichon activism, and I played a role in supporting the establishment of World Without War in 2003. Yeah. So this is the story. And on a more personal note, my involvement in activism stemmed from my parents' progressive leanings. I think I started with student activism, and around the time of my graduation, I was part of an organization formed by friends who were also involved in the student activism, which eventually became the organization I mentioned, the Solidarity for Peace and Human Rights. While this organization made significant contributions to peace movement in South Korea, particularly in pioneering conscientious objection movement, but we eventually realized the vast differences between student activism and social activism, and leading us to move on from its short, impactful history spanning about 20 years. So now this organization has since faded into obscurity, and its remaining legacy has merged into World Without War.
And can we just spend some time to talk about the current aims of World Without War? What are you mentioned a little bit about current campaigns. Can we just expand what you folks are doing right now? What are your main aims?
Okay. The World Without War envisions creating a world without war. Yeah, you can tell from the name.
Yes.
And both on the Korean Peninsula and globally, of course. And we have much to do for a world without war, but we've decided to address two things, which is conscription system and arms trade in South Korea. For undermining conscription, we've primarily engaged in activities supporting conscientious objectors, and as a result, alternative service has been introduced, as I mentioned earlier, providing those facing military conscription with some options. However, the current alternative service system isn't exactly what we desire, so there's room for improvement.
Yes.
That becomes one of our goals. Additionally, we are currently assisting Russian conscientious objector refugees seeking asylum in South Korea, as they haven't been recognized as refugees yet. So this is also one of our current goals. And in Thailand, the first conscientious objector emerged, and we located in the same Asian the region, and so we invited him to our 20th anniversary event last year to discuss how South Korea's conscientious objection movement can collaborate with Taiwan. So this is another goal for us at the moment. And expelling arms fairs remains as ongoing aim. However, considering the enormity of the task, it's more realistic to aim for halting air shows held during arms fairs, or preventing invitations to specifically VIPs from countries currently in conflict. And in South Korea, information related to arms trade is classified, and while we've been obtaining some information through the assistance of legislatures or foreign organization, I think that the information disclosure activities is also one of our plans at the moment. And finally, we also in the planning stage of forming an Asian solidarity network, particularly concerning police weapons, but it's still in the planning phase.
Yeah, that's all very important stuff, and there are strong parallels with some of the stuff I and people I know have done.
Mhm.
obviously the arms fair every 2 years, I believe it's here.
Mhm.
The police, the use of British police technology around
Yeah.
various regimes in the
Mhm.
world. It's interesting. There's a lot of similarities going on
Mhm.
there. I wanted
Yeah.
to I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of militarism in Korea is very interesting to me,
Mm.
because obviously
Mm.
I'm going to guess, you can tell me, I'm going to guess there is Korea's own internal militarism, but that
Yeah.
must be connected very strongly with American militarism. Korea,
Mhm.
in a much more, Britain also has American bases, but Korea
Mhm.
has probably more troops
Yes.
than the UK by quite a large number. Can you talk to us a little bit about the specifics of militarism
Mhm.
in your country?
Yes. Um, it's kind of a tough question to answer briefly, but I'll give it a shot. Uh, Militarism in South Korea operates and influences a wide range of areas, including the military, politics, economy, labor, gender, body, everywhere. However, if I were to give an overview, I would start with the confrontation with North Korea,
Mhm.
which has been a central aspect. The word North Korea almost functioned like a magic word, capable of quelling any dissatisfaction. The prolonged military standoff with North Korea justified the argumentation of military power, introduction of new weapons, maintenance of conscription, and existence of national security law
Mhm.
and U.S. bases, etc. Especially now with seemingly crazy leaders in both North and South Korea cursing each other, the situation is worsening.
Mhm.
Especially, there has been a continuous spread of speculation about Korean Peninsula war crisis, especially by foreign medias. Um, Anyway, during such times, friends living abroad often ask me if a real war is imminent. My response is usually uncertain. I think it's unlikely that a full-scale war will break out, but localized and accidental military clashes have occurred in the past and could happen again. Actually, most Koreans don't feel a significant threat of war at the moment. In fact, for them, life, yeah, revolves around the daily uh, life grind as a survival takes precedence over thoughts of war, I think. Anyways, the Korean War, which lasted from 1950 to 1953, resulted in an estimated total of nearly 3 million deaths or disappearances, including about 45,000 US military fatalities.
Mhm.
Disproportionately high civilian death toll compared to other wars like the Vietnam War or World War II. Virtually every Korean lost a relative in this war, and the generation that experienced it is still alive. So consequently, South Korea has experienced the formation of the nation through recent wars and followed by over 3 decades of military dictatorship, a powerful conscription system, a massive military, the South Korea-US alliances, and a constant state of near war readiness, resulting in social effects of militarism across all the aforementioned aspects.
If you enjoy what we produce and would like to support us to make more of it, then you can help us keep making Warrior Nation for as little as £2 a month via our Patreon, or you can support us through our donation page. And if you'd like to keep up to date with our work, you can sign up for our free monthly newsletter. See the show notes for more details. That kind of brings us on to our next question. We're
Mhm,
also a militarized country, and that presents
mhm,
particular challenges. And I suppose I mean by that,
mhm,
how does the How does the general population respond to peace activism, anti-militarist activism? How does the state maybe respond to anti-militarist activism? And what kind of barriers do you face as someone who's trying to advance these kind of ideas for a different world?
Well, in a way, the role of militarism in normalizing a militarized society makes it somewhat understandable why people accept it as a given.
Yes.
But in Korean society, we need to examine the neo-colonial history as well. For instance, until the late 1990s, peace activism, peace movement in South Korea was synonymous with unification movement with North Korea. While the standoff with North Korea does dominate much of Korea's militaristic narrative, this movement inherently carries a nationalist undertone. For example, from the perspective of those of us engaged in consensus objection movement, it seems really odd to say, well, it's okay to object to military service now because the current South Korean military is essentially a subsidiary of the United States. But once unification is achieved and foreign forces withdraw, you shouldn't object to military service. So it's really odd. So while it was a peace movement, it wasn't necessarily, anti-militaristic. Currently, Korea's anti-militarism movement is in its early stages, transitioning away from the nationalist perspective of unification movements towards advocating for demilitarization and world without war, of course. So, given the relatively short history of peace movements in South Korea, it's still challenging to expect a widespread questioning of militarism among the general public in South Korea. And moreover, especially during tough economic times like now, there's a tendency to justify militarism. Like people often think that selling weapons can contribute to improving the Korean economy, so they consider it acceptable. In South Korea, where regional disparities are severe, local governments outside of Seoul are heavily focused on attracting defense industries, defense factories, and even prioritize establishing defense-related departments in high schools and universities. I remember feeling like conflicted when I heard at an international conference that one European activist said that the campaign against arms trade stimulates people's morality. It made me wonder how we can stimulate morality over money in South Korea. I believe that effort is still needed in South Korea to achieve that. But it's not all bleak, I think. I believe nowadays attitudes towards North Korea among South Koreans have become more lenient compared to before. And there's also a growing awareness of politicians exploiting North Korea for their own gains, not for our security. So we are now have to challenge this militarism in our society. It seems like the existence of North Korea poses a unique challenge for us, which could also be connected to the previous question. Regardless of the political orientation in South Korea, military preparedness and defense industries are considered crucial due to North Korea. As a result, we are often criticized as idealists. For example, we frequently hear questions like, if you don't join the military, who will defend the country? Or if you stop arms trading, but North Korea doesn't, what will we do? Or if you oppose conscription, are you advocating for professional army? Something like that. So our stance stance on these dualities often puts us in uncomfortable positions. Uh, Moreover, as a woman, I also face challenges in South Korea. There's a prevalent perception that only men can voice opinions on military-related issues, which is, I believe, another form of militarism.
Yes.
Yeah, despite being one of the leader in the consensus objection movement, I was still restricted from participating in any debates or writing articles due to my gender. Even if given the opportunity, the questions I often faced, like revolved around how I felt about friends going to prison instead of serving in the military. So are you sad or something like that, rather than having opportunities to contribute my expertise on consensus objection or military issues. So therefore, in campaigning, like the arms trade monitoring campaign, yeah, the non-male like me individuals mainly took on leadership roles and engaged in actions and raised their voices.
It would be nice to talk a little bit more about that, maybe.
Mhm.
How do you? That must be very tiring. It must make you very
Mhm.
frustrated. How do
Mhm.
you overcome that? What do you do to deal with those prejudices?
This kind of prejudices is still going on, but I believe it's getting better. So, um, among our World Without War circle, people try to they put some efforts to make things better, uh, inside and outside. For example, inside we don't take a role to care the imprisoned consensus objectors as a woman. So we make buddies with the imprisoned consensus objectors and release consensus objectors. So they taking care of each other, or so we are trying to avoid the typical gender roles
Yes.
in
Yeah.
our movement, but it doesn't reflect in the outside of the movement, because the media, they want to see what they want to see. So it's been challenging, but I think I can overcoming this with my friends and colleagues' help, and still working on it.
Yeah. A work in progress. A work in
Yes.
progress, as it is everywhere, of
Mhm.
course.
Mhm.
Um, Well, we kind of just touched on it there. There are many reasons that anti-militarism, and particularly in a militarized world, which is the one
Mhm.
we live in,
Mhm.
obviously, anti-militarism is hard. It's a long fight, if you like. And we always like to ask in this series our guests, how do you sustain your energy?
Mhm.
How do you stay mentally healthy, or however you want to you would like to frame it, to keep doing
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
what is often very difficult work, which takes a very long time. How do you keep going? What do you do?
Yes. Um, yeah, you are absolutely true. Anti-militarism is an exhausting endeavor. Um, So we've had some colleagues in our group who had to step out due to like burnout.
Yeah.
Back in 2008, when the promise of introducing alternative service was reneged upon, many activists struggled with burnout and a sense of helplessness. Uh, Seeing the ever expanding arms trade fairs in South Korea and the construction of the new naval base in Jeju Island, which eventually got built despite our efforts, often brings back those feelings. Um, after the conservative government came into power in 2003 and reneged on its promises, we no longer prioritized activities related to alternative service. Over the following decade, while still engaging in conscientious objection and facing imprisonment, our focus shifted to actively participating in the movement against the construction of a new neighbor base in Jeju Island, which was a significant social issue at the time. This effort aimed to expand the conscientious objection movement into an anti-militarist movement. These efforts revitalized our organization and brought people together. This decision was greatly influenced by a workshop conducted in collaboration with Andreas Speck from WLI, who was familiar with our situation and suggested Bill Moyer's MAP training. So in that training, we discussed how to view the movement in a long term and how to understand other activists. So this effort proved to be crucial in revitalizing our movement during one of its most challenging periods in history. And we also try to set smart goals, like specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound goals, and celebrate even small successes to sustain our motivation. So, well, it's not easy, but we are trying. And thankfully, being a very small group, we know each other well and understand each other's circumstances well. After years of working together, we've been each other's like best friends, which has its advantages, I think. Except for the three of us working in the office, everyone else has other jobs, but they really enjoy coming to meetings in the evenings. We find like solace in each other's company by making fun action plans, whether it's after a meeting or a gathering over food, drinks, or tea, especially in such a harsh world. Yeah, so I think we are, even though we are a social movement organization, but we are almost like a community. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. I agree. It's very important to have that because it's very difficult to sustain yourself. Otherwise, maybe we kind of touched on a little bit of it there, but maybe we can stay on a similar question, which is the next one. More organizationally, how do you plan? How do you pick? You have two active campaigns at the moment, but can you talk us through a little bit the processes of how you decide to operate, how you decide to allocate time and resources? Because that's the stuff in this series we really want to be able to distill these things and share them between ourselves, these different anti-militarist organizations. So could you talk to us a little bit about how you plan and execute your actions, your strategies, etc.?
Yeah. We've got these working groups that handles our two main campaigns, which is conscientious objection and arms trade monitoring. Basically, we idea storm, brainstorm, and prioritize our actions and prioritize our resources and execute our plans there in the working groups. When we set our goals, we consider how crucial and pressing the issue are. And we also take a step back to see if the current circumstances are favorable for our activities or not. So sometimes if there's something we feel maybe another group could handle this issue better, we'll suggest it to them sometimes. And while the practical side of things is supported by the office, the strategizing and implementation mainly happen within the working group. And we keep in touch daily using like messaging apps. Like Telegram is pretty common among social
Same
movement
here, same here.
organizations.
Very
Yeah,
popular at the
exactly.
moment, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, group chats are great for quick communication and everyday communication. But we also find out they are most effective when used when when used when used sparingly.
Yes.
Yeah, and another principle is not to set overly strict schedules, so we can adapt flexibly if unexpected changes or urgent issues arise. We learn from this principle when we had to handle the varying South Korean tear gas issues arose. So that's became another principle of us, and as I mentioned earlier, we try to set goals as smart as possible. I think, yeah.
Yeah,
That
I'm just thinking, I suppose the Arab Spring is kind of the time that those apps got really big, isn't it? When everyone started to use WhatsApp and various other ones as well. Because I remember
Yeah.
they called it the Twitter revolution, which I don't think is accurate
Yeah.
myself. But that
Mhm.
obviously the impact of social media was very profound at that time.
Mhm.
So yeah, no, it's interesting. I guess we've kind of talked about some of the tools there. So maybe we can move
Mhm.
on to the last question.
Yeah.
And this is a very difficult question. We ask it to everyone because it's difficult, of course. And it's, how do you measure your successes and failures? And everyone has given a very interesting answer to this, because some people kind of
Mhm.
say they don't use it in a kind of metric way. They look at it in different
Mhm.
ways. But this question
Mhm.
has always produced interesting, thoughtful answers. So
Mhm.
how do you yourself and your organization, how do you
Mhm.
decide where you've had a win and where you've
Mhm.
not had a win?
Mhm. Well, perhaps the most accurate measure, I don't know if measure is a correct word, but measure of success or failure is whether our demands have been met.
Mhm.
However, in activism, it's rarely that simple, I think. For instance, while the introduction of alternative service met our demands in principle, but it wasn't exactly what we had hoped for in practice. So there's a question of whether to see it as a success or a failure. Um, so we decide to, we decide to celebrate it as a success and had a big party.
Mhm.
Uh, but while the outcome wasn't entirely satisfying, considering the power imbalances at play and the challenges faced by other movements in South Korean society, I believe it was a significant achievement. So as we evaluated the campaign, we emphasized the importance of not getting discouraged if the result won perfectly and not reverting back to the situation in 2008 when we were suffering from the sense of helplessness and burned out.
Mhm.
So we encouraged each other to continue the movement to amend the current alternative service law. Uh, while there's no definitive answer in activism, but I think we believe our approach was the right one at the time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We don't have conscription here, though there is a
Mm-hmm.
lot of talk at the moment. I suggest a
Mm-hmm.
lot of it's rhetorical about bringing it back, which would be,
Oh,
I suspect, there's a lot of people who are very, very pro-war around Russia, China, etc.,
no.
etc. A lot of conservatives, particularly in this country, talk about conscription. But
Mm-hmm.
one of the campaigns we've worked on is that in this country we recruit to the army very young. 16, which I think is one of only a handful of countries that do it. But that is, and that why I bring it up is because it is a very difficult, long campaign, which lots of people have been pursuing for a very long time, but it's really tough. But yeah, you have to. But there have been small wins. There have been things which are identifiable as wins. Maybe not in the way you want, but they are, and they should be recognised. It's important to do that. It's very important to do that, I think.
Yeah.
For sure. So thank you for those insights. The parallels are very interesting. I wondered if, as we're closing, we're coming to the end now. I wonder if you have any kind of closing thoughts when you look at anti-militarism in your country and you look at it around the world, and it's particularly in the context of today where massive arms budgets are increasing. There's war in Gaza. There's war in Europe and Ukraine, and in Asia, of course, there are kind of bubblings of war between the US and China. Do you have any reflections about how things are and where we should go from here?
Yes, I agree with you, and I believe this is the really depressing time that we have very little time and money to have to deal with this global climate crisis, but we had the war in Ukraine, and what we see Israeli government did. But I think it's important to see not the whole world, but to see sometimes just doing what you can do. Then one day you look up and we see the progress. I think this is the mind we need to have at the moment. Otherwise, we probably fall into the hole that we can't do anything. Those kind of feelings.
Definitely. Jung-min, thank you so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to speaking to you about your work. You've been a fantastic guest. This has been Warrior Nation. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. We want to reach as many listeners as possible, so whatever platform you're hearing this on, please pop us a 5-star rating. Apparently, it really helps in terms of spreading the word. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram on @ForcesWatch. See you next time. If you enjoy what we produce and would like to support us to make more of it, then you can help us keep making Warrior Nation for as little as £2 a month via our Patreon, or you can support us through our donation page. And if you'd like to keep up to date with our work, you can sign up for our free monthly newsletter.